Today, we're diving into the world of greens supplements. These products are everywhere these days, promising a convenient way of getting in your daily veggies. But how effective are they really? Are they a must-have for good health? Are they just nice to have? Do they do nothing at all? Let's unpack this a little bit. If all that sounds good to you, let's go. Hi folks, welcome to my channel or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and on this channel I like to talk about weight inclusive and weight neutral focused approaches to health, as well as diving into scammy and, in my opinion, unethical nutrition related businesses, products, mostly nutrition related MLMs, and other fear mongering nutrition related claims. Now let's just get into the idea of greens supplements. Sometimes greens products are marketed in a way that helps just with overall vegetable consumption, not saying that it replaces vegetables and fruits, but a way to get some in, especially on days where maybe your overall intake outside of that is not very much. That kind of messaging I can understand, I can get behind. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Other times they are marketed as this kind of need for health. Now, it's important to note that there is not one single kind of supplement that is necessary for everyone. There's not one single kind of supplement that's going to work for everyone. That's just not how science works. Now, there are some pros to these kind of supplements. There are also some cons. Let's talk about them, and we will get into those. But first, I want to talk about what these kind of green supplements are in the first place. Now, greens typically are a blend, a variety of different kind of ingredients. They commonly include leafy greens, so whether that's coming from things like kale, spinach, collards, etc. They also typically have other kind of vegetables as well, so like broccoli, carrots, tomatoes. They might have things from the sea as well, like seaweed, different kinds of seaweed. There's oftentimes some kind of grasses, whether that's like barley grass, wheatgrass, oats grass, alfalfa. There's usually also like a higher antioxidant containing food like goji berries, acai berries, blueberries. Sometimes there can be an extract added in there like green tea extract. There might be some probiotics. Typically those are going to be the ones that are more researched, ones you might find in like over-the-counter probiotics. Not a huge fan of probiotic supplements, but that's kind of another story. I'll touch on that though. Sometimes greens products might also have a prebiotic, which is, you can think of it as like the food for the probiotics, and this would include things like chicory root or inulin, rice bran, apple fiber, things like that. There may also be some kind of plant-based enzymes to help with the breakdown of food. You'll typically see that as like amylase, cellulase, proteases, just a variety. There's so many different kinds of enzymes. Now, unless you have like an enzyme deficiency, usually they're not necessary, but you'll typically see those added in a lot of times. There's also the addition of herbs sometimes, like milk thistle or holy basil. Sometimes they will also add mushrooms in. And then lastly, typically they'll add in some kind of flavoring or some kind of like sweetener to it, whether that is coming from like stevia or xylitol or just a variety of different options. That is kind of like the menu almost, and then different kind of products pick and choose what they really want to focus on. Some of them are the actual vegetables that are dried and like powdered from there, like dried and ground into a powder, whereas other ones are juiced, and then that juice is then dried and ground into a powder. And then there are some components that might be extracted from a whole vegetable or a whole ingredient. Now let's talk about some of the pros, some of the potential benefits that one might find with consuming something like a green supplement. Now they can be helpful when there is kind of a lower intake of vegetable consumption going on, whether that's because of preference or time, cost, availability, right? Any one of those things could impact if someone has a, reduced amount of vegetable intake. Maybe they're only able to consume a vegetable like once a day, 0 times a day, just depending on what's going on. One might find it helpful in that case. They can also provide a lot of micronutrients at one time. And whenever you're consuming a lot of micronutrients at one time, one of the concerns is that a lot of it's going to be excreted. Typically it's excreted beyond what the body will need, and then what is needed will be utilized. And so even if there is some excretion going on, there is still some utilization going on. Now, one of the other benefits is that fruits and vegetables, plant foods in general, they are not just, the micronutrients aren't just in reference to the vitamins and the minerals, but also what is called phytonutrients. Those are just plant chemicals. I'll actually put up a picture of what is in a blueberry, for example. There's a lot that those phytonutrients can help. Now, we don't fully understand the benefits of all of those additional kind of phytonutrients or plant chemicals, but those aren't necessarily able to be replicated right now with like vitamin supplements, for example. And so one of the reasons why there is that promotion or the recommendation to consume vegetables and fruits is because of the additional kind of plant nutrients that are in there. Now, Now, one might find that if they're experiencing more like elevated inflammation going on with their bodies, one of the things I think of is athletes who are maybe training for, like, they're in competition season or they're training up leading up to competition season, they might be experiencing more inflammation. And so some additional just kind of support nutrient wise might be something that might be helpful. It's not going to make or break them as an athlete or anything. Several months ago, I had someone who was training. They added on a greens kind of supplement just to help them because they were just using so much energy throughout the day with the training. And because their caloric needs were so high, they were just not hungry for more vegetables and more fruits. And so having something that was a little bit easier to get down was just helpful. So it really depends on the context. Now, I'll also say that with those benefits that we talked about, they are not meant to replace vegetables and fruits that are not in that kind of green supplement form. Green supplements are usually low in fiber, and we need that fiber for digestive health overall. That fiber is really beneficial for digestive health, overall health, and so if someone is just relying on green supplements, they're not getting the whole benefits that they would if they were consuming vegetables and fruits in other forms. Now, also with the concentration, there could be some concerns of contaminants or some like heavy metals. It really just depends on the source of the vegetables and the amounts consumed. And so whatever the company that you're looking at, I'd really, really encourage you to just, even if you need to reach out to them and get some information on like the kind of third-party testing that is done. That's something, better safe than sorry. And you can typically check the producer's website for those kind of things, but if they're not listed or if you can't find them, then, feel free to reach out. I'm telling you feel free as if I'm the one answering, but you should use that contact us form. Now, if you are thinking about consuming starting a green supplements, it's really important to know what is the ingredient label, to know if there are any additional kind of ingredients in there that might contraindicate or might be contraindicated with a health condition that you have or medications that you have. Just because something is grown organically, whatever, that does not mean that it is safe for you. This is where like working or asking your doctor, your pharmacist, registered dietitian, that can be helpful for determining like what product, if something is going to be like concerning or not concerning or a good idea. Now, some of the cons around it and the stuff that we already mentioned about the lack of fiber, for example, is that they're not going to be as regulated as like food or medications because they are typically seen as a supplement. Now, there are some greens products, there are some like vegetable powders that do choose to go the like food route. So like you'll see that there is an actual like nutrition label, a food label. There are reasons why some might choose to have a food label versus a supplement label. A food label, it doesn't provide a lot of information regarding micronutrients, which is a big selling point for a greens product. The label is typically focused around like carbohydrates, fats, proteins, the caloric value overall, rather than the micronutrients. There are a few micronutrients listed on there, but it's nothing like a supplement label. And so if you have a vegetable powder, for example, that is wanting to market as more of like this is just ground up fruits and vegetables, this is like a food product, then they might use the nutrition label. But most of them, I would say, the ones that I've seen use a supplement label because they're better able to show the micronutrient variety within the product. And it's important to know that there's different regulations, whether one is seen as like a food or one is seen as a supplement. And we know, if you're familiar with this channel, we've talked about supplements before, the regulation, the strictness is just not there like it is with food and medication. So that's something also to keep in mind. Also, not necessarily another con, but if you are having a variety of intake overall, if you've gotten your blood work and there's no deficiencies showing up, if you're generally feeling pretty good, energized, you might not need it. Like if you already do have like a very nourishing consumption, like do you really need it? Also keep that in mind. Now you might be asking, who would benefit from some kind of green supplement? Now these kind of supplements might be helpful for someone who genuinely has some struggle with consuming vegetables or fruits, those with certain dietary restrictions, certain medical conditions. Like it really depends on the person. Like for those, whether it's based on like preferences or like certain conditions. It could also be helpful for people with limited access to produce or very active people people who maybe have an increased need for some nourishment, like higher nutritional needs, and what they're able to like comfortably consume because of like the amounts of calories that they need to get in overall. There can be times where access to produce can be limited, and so this might be helpful for that. Now, I do want to give some tips if somebody is using some kind of greens product. It's really helpful to shake the container that it's in to make sure that you're getting a wide variety of those ingredients, because it can kind of separate. Even though it's ground really well, it's helpful to mix it up just to make sure you're getting a good variety of the ingredients. Now, you can use it on its own. I've found that it tastes best in like super cold water, but you can also use it in other ways. You can use it in smoothies, in soups. Sometimes people add it to like a vegetable dip, or in salad dressings, in muffin batter. I've seen it in a variety of ways. Now, I'll say a lot of that depends on the flavor profile of it. Now, as far as what to look for, I would look for third-party testing, whether it's readily available. I always encourage supplement producers to have it readily available, to have third-party testing shown on their website so that people can find it. But if it's not readily available, reach out to them. Ask them what their processes are, what their third-party testing kind of protocol is. Just check the website. And then, of course, also consult with your doctor if you can, or pharmacist, registered dietitian, to make sure that it is not contraindicated with your conditions or medications. I would also not encourage it if somebody has like a more restrictive eating history. If somebody is like using those as a way of not consuming other forms of produce, then that is something where I would not feel comfortable recommending. In conclusion, green supplements can offer a convenient way of increasing the consumption of produce. However, it is not equivalent as other forms of produce. Lack of fiber, for example. They can help to fill in the gaps when vegetable intake is low for a variety of reasons, but it is important to always consider individual nutrient needs and to consult with a health professional before starting, especially if it has additional like herbs in there, mushrooms in there, things beyond vegetables and fruits. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that I'm not ever going to recommend a specific product or brand for everyone. That's just not how it works, even though I wish I could. If it would be that easy, that would be great, but that's not the case. I cannot feel good about recommending one thing for everyone, but there are certainly ones that I find more enjoyable and ones that I would feel a little bit more comfortable with, none of which include Bloom, but it really does depend on the person. But I can't think of a person who I would recommend Bloom to. All right, that wraps it up for this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, make sure you're subscribed. I'd greatly appreciate that. And remember, you can strive for health without subscribing to diet culture. I'll see you later.